Welcome, dear listener. This is your time now, a time to set aside the noise of the day, the thoughts that hurried through your hours, and let them drift away gently. Like leaves carried by a quiet stream, find a place where you feel most at ease. Perhaps lying back beneath the weight of a blanket or resting with your head on a pillow that seems to cradle you. Let your breathing soften, unhurried. Let your body feel supported, safe, and warm. Tonight I will tell you a gentle story, one woven slowly, like the folding of delicate paper. One that carries whispers of love, companionship, and stillness. It is not a story of great events or loud moments, but of quiet discoveries, of soft connections that bloom gently, like dusk falling across a meadow. The story is called The Papered of That Knew Her Name, and as you listen, you may find that each word feels slower than the last, each image softer, more dreamlike, until the story feels less like something you are hearing and more like a place you are resting within. So let us begin. With a man walking softly through the woods, and a folded paper of waiting in the stillness for him to notice, Theo had always liked to walk at the edge of the day. There was something in the hush of the evening, when the air seemed to hold both light and shadow in its hands, that felt like home to him. The forest near his village had long become his quiet companion, tall trees rising like gentle guardians, moss soft beneath his steps, the scent of pine and cool earth steady in the air. One evening, when the sun had dipped low and the sky was turning pale gold, Theo noticed something unusual resting against the roots of an old beech tree. At first, he thought it was a fallen leaf, curled and light. But as he leaned down, brushing away the soft bed of needles, he found it was something else entirely. A small paper dove. Its wings were folded with such care, its beak neat and pointed, its body balanced so delicately that it seemed as though it could lift itself into the air at any moment. The paper had yellowed only slightly with time, but the folds were still crisp, as though made by hands that cherished the act of folding. Theo turned it over in his palm. There was no writing, no mark, just the simplicity of its form. Yet something about it stirred a tenderness in him. He held it carefully, as one might hold something breakable, something beloved. As he continued walking, the dove remained with him. It felt like a quiet message, though from whom he could not say, and in the days that followed, it happened again. Each evening, as the forest slipped toward twilight, Theo found another, resting on a low branch or nestled in the grass, or tucked against a stone along the path. Always a paper dove, folded with the same precision, waiting as though it knew he would pass that way. He never saw anyone leave them. He never heard a step or a breath to betray another presence. Only the quiet offering, the folded wings, the silence that seemed to say, "This is for you." And though he could not explain why, he began to look forward to them. He began to slow his steps, his eyes lingering near the roots and rocks, his heart a little lighter when he discovered another delicate bird waiting. At tea night, in his small home, he placed them gently upon a shelf by the window, and when the moonlight drifted across the room, it touched the wings of paper, making them glow faintly like tiny guardians keeping him company in the dark. Theo could not help but wonder. Who had folded them? Why did they appear only for him? And why, when he looked at their simple forms, did he feel less alone than before? As the nights turned quietly toward autumn, and the forest deepened in its colors, he carried those questions gently in his heart, not as burdens, but as soft mysteries like the hush of twilight itself, always waiting, always tender. And in that gentle wondering, he felt a longing he had not named before. A longing not for answers perhaps, but for closeness, for the warmth of knowing someone's presence, Even in silence, the paper doves had become his companions. And though he could not yet know it, they were leading him towards someone whose name was folded into the wings themselves. Waiting to be revealed, the days drifted onward in their unhurried way, and Theo found himself moving through them with a gentler step. Work still filled his daylight hours, as it always had. Mending fences, stacking firewood, tending the small tasks that kept his home in order. Yet the thought of evening, of the forest, of those folded wings waiting for him, its softened each moment, gave it a quiet undercurrent of anticipation. And so, as dusk approached, he would make his way along the familiar path once more. It was during one of these walks that he noticed a subtle pattern. The paper doves, though appearing in different places each evening, always seemed to guide him in a particular direction. At first, he had thought it was chance, one left at a tree stump, another near a hollow log, but the more he found, the clearer it became. Each dove, no matter how quietly placed, seemed to draw him toward the same hill. It was a small rise at the forest's edge, overlooking the river valley below. The hill was not remarkable, a scattering of wildflowers, a cluster of birch trees, whose pale trunks glowed softly in twilight. And yet, when Theo reached it, a sense of stillness would always gather there, as though the world itself was holding its breath. He would stand for a while, the paper dove resting in his hand, and let the sky darken around him. He liked the way the horizon softened as the day gave way to evening, how the light thinned into silver strands across the water. There was a sense of waiting in that place, though he did not know what for, and always on the slope of the hill, or among the grasses nearby, he would find another dove, sometimes one, sometimes two, folded with the same care, the same silent devotion. The forest became a map of quiet discoveries. Each path he took, each turn he followed, seemed to guide him back to that hill. Even if he chose a different way, wandering deeper among the pines, somehow he would emerge again at the same place, the birches standing pale against the sky, the air cool with the scent of river mist, and waiting there, another dove, as though it had drifted down from unseen hands. Theo began to wonder if the doves were not simply objects, but messages, or perhaps invitations. He did not know from whom. Yet when he held them, a warmth stirred quietly in him, not of recognition exactly, but of being gently seen. There were evenings when he lingered longer, sitting in the grass at the top of the hill, watching the sky shift from blue to violet to night. He would place the doves beside him in a row, their wings catching the faint shimmer of starlight. And though no one came, the space did not feel empty. In the hush of those twilight hours, Theo began to listen more closely, not only to the rustling leaves and the flowing water, but to the quiet within himself. There, in the softest corners of his heart, he began to feel as though someone was near. Not seen, not yet known, but near in a way that stilled him, a presence folded into the air itself. And so each evening he returned, not with urgency, not with demand, but with a kind of reverence. The forest had become a place of gentle guidance, the hill, a place of waiting, and the doves, small tokens of a story that was slowly unfolding, one that his heart longed to read, line by delicate line. The evenings had grown cooler now. Autumn leaves had begun to loosen their hold, drifting in slow spirals to the forest floor. The air carried a hush of change, a faint crispness, a golden softness, as though each day was folding gently into the next. Theo had come to expect the paper doves, their presence woven into the rhythm of his walks. And yet one evening, as he followed the familiar trail to the hill, something shifted. He had paused near the river that wound at the forest's edge, its surface reflecting threads of pale light. The water moved with a steady whisper, carrying with it the scent of stone and fallen leaves. And there, beside the riverbank, he saw her. She was seated on a smooth rock, her posture quiet, her hands busy with something delicate. The twilight brushed softly across her face, catching in her hair like strands of copper and shadow. Her fingers moved with practiced ease, folding, creasing, smoothing the edges of a small square of paper. A dove, Theo, lingered at the edge of the trees, his breath caught in stillness. He did not wish to startle her, nor to break the fragile quiet of the scene before him. For a long moment, he only watched as her hands shaped the paper into wings, as though the act itself was a kind of prayer. At last, she looked up. Her eyes, calm and unhurried, met his. There was no surprise in them, no alarm, only a steady awareness. As though she had known he would arrive, as though she had been waiting. Theo stepped closer, his movements slow, respectful. "I've been finding them," he said softly, his voice low so as not to disturb the river's whisper. He held out one of the doves he had kept with him. "These are yours." A small smile touched her lips, not quick, not fleeting, but gentle, like light settling onto the water. "Yes," she said, her voice soft, almost like the folding of paper itself. "They have been traveling for a long time." Theo knelt by the riverbank, the grass cool beneath his hand. "Why leave them?" he asked. "Why here?" She looked down at the dove she had just folded, her fingers lingering against its wings. "When I was a child," she said, "I used to fold these and let the wind carry them. I thought, perhaps they would find someone who needed them. Perhaps they would carry my name in ways I could not." Her words drifted into the quiet like threads of silk, and Theo felt something stir in him, a tenderness, a recognition he could not yet name. He placed his dove gently beside hers on the rock. The two small birds rested there, side by side, their folded wings brushing faintly. They sat together in silence, not needing to fill it. The river spoke for them, its steady murmur carrying the stillness between. Theo watched the way her hands lingered on the folds, the way her gaze softened when she looked at the small creation she had made. There was a grace in her presence, not in grandeur but in simplicity, a quiet steadiness that felt like home. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, she lifted one of the doves and set it gently upon the water. The current carried it away, its small wings trembling against the surface before drifting out of sight. "They know where to go," she whispered, and Theo, watching the paper bird float into the night, felt as though she might be speaking not only of the doves, but of something within them both. The evenings that followed unfolded with a quiet grace. Theo returned to the riverbank often, and she was always there, sometimes seated on the same smooth stone, sometimes leaning against the birches, always with a small square of paper in her hands. Her fingers moved steadily, folding wings, smoothing edges, sending each little bird into the water or the breeze. He never asked her name. She never offered it. And somehow, the silence between them did not feel empty, but whole. One night, as the air grew colder and the moon rose high, Theo carried with him one of the older doves he had found weeks before. Something about it had caught his attention. A faint shimmer on the wing, as though the paper itself had been brushed with dew. By the firelight in his home, he had noticed the mark more clearly. At first, it was nothing, just a pale trace, almost invisible. But as he held it near the flame, the faintest lines began to emerge, curved, delicate letters. A name, her name. Theo had whispered it aloud in the quiet of his room, the sound soft, reverent. It felt both strange and familiar on his tongue, as though the word had been waiting in him for years. And now, seated beside her at the riverbank, he reached gently into his pocket and placed the dove between them. I saw something, he said softly. She lifted the bird carefully, her fingers brushing the wings. As she turned it toward the lantern light, the faint ink shimmered once more. Her eyes lowered, then lifted to his, not startled, not fearful, but deeply quiet. You found it, she whispered. Theo nodded. They all carry your name, don't they? Her lips curved into a tender smile. Yes, written in ink that fades from sight, but to the one who is meant to read it. The letters return. He felt his breath ease slowly, his heart steady as the truth settled between them like a folded wing. And you. You meant for me to find them. Her gaze held his, steady and unhurried. Perhaps I did. The words were not heavy, not burdened with expectation. They drifted as gently as the river's current, soft and unforced. Yet Theo felt them settle deep within him, as though something that had long been folded was now unfolding, opening. The silence that followed was full of unspoken knowing, of warmth, of a closeness that needed no explanation. She reached for another square of paper, placed it in his palm. Here, she said softly, fold with me. Theo hesitated. His hands were rougher, less practiced, but she guided him gently, her fingers brushing his as she showed him how to crease the corners, how to smooth the edges, how to shape the wings. Their hands touched lightly, and though the contact was small, it seemed to carry a weight of tenderness greater than words. Together, they placed the finished dove on the water. It floated quietly, drifting into the starlit current, carrying with it not only her name, but the beginning of something shared. And in that quiet, Theo felt a realization settle gently into him, that he had not been walking toward the hill, nor the forest, nor the doves themselves, but toward her. The days slipped quietly into one. Another, as days often do when lived without haste. Theo found himself walking to the riverbank not out of curiosity anymore, but out of a quiet need, the same way one might seek a warm light in the evening or the comfort of a familiar chair. And always she was there. Sometimes they spoke, though softly, in voices no louder than the wind in the trees. But more often they simply folded together. She would hand him a square of paper, and his larger, rougher hands would try to mirror her gentle motions. He was slower, less precise, but she never corrected him harshly, only guided, her fingers brushing his, a small smile warming her face whenever his folds came uneven. It is not about perfection, she said one evening. It is about presence. The paper remembers the touch. Theo thought about that often, that each crease held a memory not just of her, but of their shared silence, their steady breaths. Beside one another, the way twilight gathered around them like a soft cloak. When the doves were finished, they would not always send them away. Sometimes they placed them carefully in a small row on the flat stone beside the river, watching as moonlight touched their wings. Sometimes they let them rest in the grass, as though the earth itself wished to hold them. And sometimes they simply held them, turning them gently in their palms, as though they were more than paper, more than folds, as though they carried something of the heart within them. One evening, as the mist curled low along the river, Theo looked at her and said, "You've been folding these since childhood?" She nodded, her gaze resting on the dove in her lap. It was the only way I knew to speak, when words felt too heavy. Folding was like breathing, and sending them was like hoping. He let her words linger in the quiet. Then, softly, he placed one of his own clumsier doves beside hers. "Then let us hope together." Her eyes lifted to his, and in them Theo saw no distance, no guardedness, only a softness like lantern light glowing against a window. And in that moment there was no need for questions, no need for answers. There was only the gentle rhythm of folding, the touch of hands brushing, the sound of paper creasing in unison. The forest around them seemed to listen. The river hushed. The birches swayed faintly, their pale trunks glowing in the dusk. And together, side by side, they created something small and tender, not meant to be lost to the wind or the water, but to remain as tokens of presence, of peace, of a closeness that needed no name. For the first time in many years, Theo felt no longing that ached, no emptiness waiting to be filled. Instead, he felt complete not with grand declarations, but with the simple weight of her presence beside him. And in that quiet, the doves resting between them seemed not like messages anymore, but like a language they now shared. The season turned gently as seasons do. The air grew cool and clear, and the forest seemed to rest more deeply with each passing day. Leaves, golden and amber, drifted slowly from the trees, spinning in unhurried circles before settling into the grass. Theo and the woman continued their evening rhythm, folding, sitting, sometimes speaking, often silent. Each meeting felt less like something arranged and more like something that simply was. As natural as dusk settling over the river, as steady as the current's flow. One night, as the stars shimmered like faint embers in the sky, she lifted a basket beside her. Inside were dozens of folded doves, waiting, their wings layered neatly. "I thought we might send them all tonight," she said softly, her voice a murmur against the hush of evening. Theo helped her take them out, one by one, placing them gently in the grass around them. Soon, the hilltop where they sat was dotted with pale wings, a small flock resting in silence. The river breeze stirred, lifting the edges of the paper. Slowly, as though waking from a long sleep, the doves began to shift, then lift, then drift. Upward into the air. Theo watched, his breath caught in quiet awe as the sky filled with them. Dozens, then hundreds, their wings fluttering softly, carried by invisible hands. They moved like whispers, like fragments of dreams taking flight, rising higher and higher into the night. The woman sat beside him, her face turned upward, her expression serene. "They carry what we have folded into them," she whispered. "Not words, not weight, only presence. They will rest wherever they are needed." Theo's hand moved slowly, almost without thought, until it found hers where it rested in the grass. He did not grip, did not hold tightly, only let his hand rest over hers, warm and steady. She did not pull away. They sat like that, beneath a sky alive with paper wings, the stars glimmering faintly between them. The world felt hushed, as though leaning close to listen. And in that stillness, Theo felt something within him settle, a peace deeper than longing, gentler than hope. Not a beginning, not an ending. Simply a presence. The doves drifted farther, smaller, until they blended with the stars. Only a few remained, circling softly before settling back to the earth, as though reminding them that not everything must leave. Some things stay, some things remain close. The woman leaned lightly against his shoulder, her breath slow, her presence calm. "Perhaps," she murmured, "we are like the doves sent quietly, only to be found." Theo closed his eyes, the warmth of her nearness steady beside him. He did not answer, for no words were needed. The night spoke for them, the river hummed gently, and the stars, distant yet familiar, seemed to fold the world into a single quiet embrace. And as the last of the paper wings floated across the sky, Theo felt the story of his days soften, not into an ending, but into something dreamlike. Something still. The forest hushed, the river flowed. And together, in that quiet presence, they drifted not into answers, but into peace. And now, dear listener, you may let your own breathing soften, slow and steady. Like the river, like the hush of night, the story rests now, but its stillness remains with you a quiet warmth, a gentle presence folded into the air around you. Close your eyes if you have not already. Let the wings of your own thoughts grow softer, lighter, until they drift upward, far away, like paper doves in the night sky. And in this calm, you may rest. Safe, held, and deeply at peace. Good night.